In less than 48 hours, the carefully constructed illusion of Queen Camilla's absolute control over. The royal workforce was quietly and ruthlessly dismantled by a single flashing red light on an electronic keypad. It did not happen with a chaotic public argument in the drawing rooms of Buckingham Palace or a messy leak to the tabloid press, but with the cold, unforgiving beep of a revoked security badge outside the central operations room at Kensington Palace. What Queen Camilla just realized behind closed doors is that while a crown grants you the highest seat at the table and the deference of the cameras, true institutional power is forged in strict administrative autonomy, unbroken bloodlines, and the silent, unyielding control of the palace apparatus. Over the next few minutes, we are going to unpack the highly opportunistic administrative power grab she recently attempted during a period of acute vulnerability for the Princess of Wales. We will expose how a secret bureaucratic mandate designed to absorb Catherine's life's work inadvertently triggered a freezing institutional retaliation engineered by Prince William, resulting in a devastating visual humiliation for Camilla's most senior staff. By the end of this breakdown, you will understand the terrifying realization currently paralyzing the Queen, despite sitting on the highest throne in the land. She commands absolutely no true authority over the next generation's empire. To understand why this specific internal clash reached a boiling point, we must first step back and recognize the staggering 30-year manipulation that brought Camilla to this pinnacle of the British social hierarchy. For 3 decades, she played the longest, most meticulous game of reputational rehabilitation in modern history. She survived the bitter public fallout of the 1990s, systematically worked to soften the global memory of her role in Princess Diana's tragedy, and patiently replaced the old institutional guards with her own staunch loyalists. Camilla knew that to survive within the firm, she had to adopt the camouflage of uncomplaining aristocratic duty while ruthlessly securing the levers of internal power. When she was officially crowned, Queen dropping the restrictive consort caveat entirely, she believed she had finally won the absolute right to dictate the internal operations of the modern monarchy. She operated under the fundamental belief that because she held the unwavering devotion of King Charles, she held the keys to the entire institution. She felt entirely untouchable, assuming that the sprawling palace bureaucracy, from the private secretaries to the press officers, would always bend to her personal public relations agenda. But the fatal flaw in Camilla's architecture of power is that it is built entirely on the fragile authority of a temporary reign. It completely ignores the sovereign autonomy of the Prince of Wales. That dangerous illusion of absolute power became a battlefield just days ago, triggered by an overwhelming sense of opportunistic ambition in recent months, as the Princess of Wales gracefully and necessarily stepped back from her grueling public duties to prioritise her health and recovery. An undeniable operational vacuum appeared in the royal calendar. To the global public, Catherine's absence is a period of quiet, respectful waiting, a testament to the uncomplaining sacrifice she has consistently provided to the crown. But behind the scenes, within the heavily guarded walls of Camilla's private office, this temporary absence was calculated as a rare window of opportunity, paralysed by a growing fear that her own public relevance would inevitably fade compared to the enduring global magnetism of William and Catherine. Camilla's team attempted to execute an act of silent institutional erasure, driven by a profound commercial desperation to cement her legacy while King Charles remains on the throne. Camilla's senior advisors drafted a highly sophisticated secret human resources directive. What appears to be true, according to internal palace leaks, is that her office quietly issued an integration mandate to the joint royal communications and patronage departments. Under the carefully sanitized guise of institutional efficiency and maintaining a unified royal brand during a difficult time, Camilla's office attempted a total administrative hijacking. The directive explicitly ordered the strategic merging of Catherine's most high-tier, globally recognized charitable patronages, particularly those focused on early childhood development and mental health, into the centralized command of the Queen's own portfolio. Furthermore, the mandate attempted to effectively reassign Kensington Palace's senior press officers and operational staff, bringing them under the direct oversight of Camilla's chief of staff. It was a calculated attempt to siphon the immense prestige, the global goodwill, and the operational machinery of the Princess of Wales, repurposing them to elevate Camilla's own sovereign presence. Camilla assumed she could quietly push these HR updates through the palace bureaucracy while Prince William was distracted by the heavy burden of his wife's recovery and his own increased state duties. She firmly believed that the household staff would comply in silence out of deference to her title, and that William would simply absorb the encroachment to avoid a public scene during a highly sensitive time for the family. But she severely underestimated the cold forensic vigilance of Prince William and the absolute unyielding protective rage he harbours for his wife. The Prince of Wales does not rely on drawing room gossip. His team relies on the meticulous monitoring of royal logistics personnel rosters and internal communications. The discovery of this secret corporate coup did not happen through an explosive family confrontation. It happened through a routine digital audit of the Joint Household Administrative Service. When William's fiercely loyal Chief of Staff intercepted the integration memos and the altered patronage organisational charts, the reality was immediate and chilling. William recognised this not as a harmless administrative consolidation, but as a parasitic encroachment upon Catherine's life's work. While Catherine was demonstrating remarkable fortitude in private, Camilla was weaponising the bureaucratic system to dismantle her influence and steal her staff. For William, this crossed an invisible, unforgivable line. It was an attack on the legacy of the mother of his children, echoing the very institutional betrayals his own mother, Princess Diana, had faced. The response from the future king was executed with a cold, ruthless legality that used the very weight of institutional protocol as a weapon. Prince William did not engage in a messy, undignified shouting match with his stepmother, nor did he allow his press team to leak angry statements that would distress his recovering wife. He used the system to execute a silent, devastating counterstrike, operating with unprecedented administrative authority as the heir apparent and the absolute controller of the Duchy of Cornwall's financial architecture. William quietly activated a strict binding protocol update. Internally, this maneuver is now quietly referred to as the ring fencing protocol. Without a single word spoken in anger, William legally and entirely severed the digital physical. An administrative connection between Kensington Palace and the broader Buckingham Palace human resources framework, he dictated that his household is a sovereign, independent operational entity funded entirely by his own estate, and absolutely no personnel reassignments or patronage integrations could occur without his direct physical signature. He stripped Camilla's office of all administrative oversight regarding his staff, effectively turning Kensington Palace into an impenetrable fortress. The execution of this silent retaliation was breathtaking in its subtlety, resulting in an absolute visual and psychological humiliation for the Queen. On the morning the integration was supposed to quietly take effect, Camilla's Chief of Staff and senior operational directors travelled to Kensington Palace, expecting to walk directly into the Joint Communications Hub to assume command. They did not find a welcoming committee of subservient staff. Instead, as Camilla's highest-ranking representatives approached the secure perimeter of the operational wing, they hit an invisible, impenetrable wall. When they swiped their all-access sovereign keycards against the heavy security doors, the system did not grant them entry. The corridor echoed with a sharp denied access beep. The electronic light flashed a freezing, undeniable red. The security personnel at the checkpoint, operating under direct binding orders from Prince William's administrative office, politely but firmly informed the Queen's staff that their clearance for the Kensington Operational Centre had been permanently revoked. They were denied entry, their digital credentials had been wiped. Furthermore, they were handed a perfectly polite, heavily formalised document from William's estate, clearly stating that any future correspondence regarding the Princess of Wales's patronages must be submitted in writing via external corporate channels and would be subject to a grueling multi-level vetting process. What looked like a routine security update was actually a total dismantling of Camilla's bureaucratic empire. By overriding her arrangements in front of the palace staff and completely locking her team out of the building, Prince William exposed the ultimate truth of the modern monarchy: Camilla may wear the crown. But William pays the salaries, he owns the buildings, and he absolutely controls the gates. As the reality of the locked door and the flashing red light was relayed back to Clarence House, Camilla experienced a wave of cold, suffocating panic. She realized that her administrative trick had not only failed, but it had permanently exposed her total lack of operational hard power. Stripped of her illusion of supreme control, administratively walled off by her stepson, and publicly disciplined without a single word being spoken, she knew the trap had snapped shut. terrified by the sudden, freezing reality that her influence ends where William's property line begins. Camilla retreated to the one remaining card she had left to play. She went directly to King Charles. She presented the revoked security logs and the humiliating ring-fencing documents, demanding that he use his supreme sovereign power to crush William's administrative blockade. She demanded that the king force the Prince of Wales to open the doors of Kensington Palace and aggressively enforce her absolute authority as queen over all royal personnel. The entire future of the internal royal hierarchy hung in the heavy, suffocating silence of the king's study, as the queen stood waiting for her husband to deliver her salvation. When Queen Camilla stood in the quiet sanctuary of the king's study, demanding that Charles use the absolute power of the sovereign to crush William's administrative blockade and unlock the doors of Kensington Palace, she expected immediate explosive compliance. For 30 years, Charles had been her ultimate shield. He had fought his mother, his advisors, the British press, and his own children to force Camilla's acceptance into the royal fold. He had spent decades burning through his own political capital to protect her from the consequences of their shared history. Camilla fully expected that in this moment of acute administrative humiliation, Charles would summon Prince William and deliver a crushing reprimand. She expected the king to remind his heir that Camilla was the queen, and that her organizational demands must be met to preserve the unity of the crown. But she encountered something far more terrifying than anger. She encountered a devastating silence. What appears to be true, according to those familiar with the internal dynamics of the king's household, is that Charles simply refused to intervene. He did not yell. He did not defend his wife's aggressive attempt to poach the Princess of Wales's staff. He looked at the revoked security logs and the ring-fencing protocol documents, sat in the suffocating quiet of his office, and did absolutely nothing. This was the psychological climax of Camilla's decades-long campaign for power, and it ended with a freezing realization. Charles is no longer the rebel Prince of Wales fighting for his mistreated lover. He is the king. And as the monarch facing his own profound vulnerabilities and the fragile state of his reign, his primary overriding duty is the survival of the crown. Charles knows with forensic clarity that William and Catherine are the absolute bedrock of the modern monarchy. They hold the public's enduring affection, they generate the positive global press, and they represent the unbroken legitimate bloodline. To attack William over a human resources dispute, especially while Catherine is privately recovering, would be an act of institutional suicide. To publicly or privately dismantle William's invocation of the ring-fencing protocol would signal a divided, chaotic monarchy that allows the king's wife to cannibalize the heir's operational foundation. In that singular moment of silence, Charles chose the structural integrity of the institution over the bureaucratic ambition of his wife. Camilla learned the hardest lesson of her royal life. The king will no longer save her from the Prince of Wales. To understand why this administrative lockout is so permanently catastrophic for Camilla, we must examine the staggering commercial desperation hiding behind her royal title. The public sees a queen riding in gilded carriages, draped in historic diamonds and waving from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. They assume that the title comes with an impenetrable fortress of wealth and independent power. But behind closed doors, the forensic financial architecture of the firm tells a remarkably different story. Camilla owns virtually nothing of the royal estate. Her secret maneuvering to absorb Catherine's patronages and staff was never just about wanting a busier schedule. It was a frantic, calculated attempt to secure a permanent organizational foothold and institutional legitimacy before her ultimate protector is gone. She knows that without King Charles, she instantly becomes a dowager queen with zero biological connection to the new monarch, completely dependent on the very stepson she just tried to outmaneuver. Prince William is not just the heir to the throne, he is the landlord. He owns the Duchy of Cornwall, the billion-dollar real estate empire that funds the monarchy's private endeavours and operational costs. He commands the vast agricultural lands, the commercial properties, and the financial portfolios that generate the family's private millions. Camilla possesses no independent constitutional funding and no vast ancestral properties of her own to fall back on. She cannot grant her own staff sweeping powers or absorb Kensington Palace's resources because she does not hold the keys to the kingdom's treasury. By activating the ring-fencing protocol, William legally, quietly, and permanently locked her out of his corporate vault, reminding her that her power is entirely theoretical while his is deeply financially structural. The realization that her entire public relations apparatus is now effectively boxed in by her stepson's administrative goodwill is a psychological prison of her own making. The illusion of absolute operational control was instantly replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of her dependency, as Camilla's shadow empire was quietly dismantled in the corridors of Kensington Palace. The visual landscape of the monarchy began to immediately reflect the new order. This is where the silent execution of revenge translates into undeniable public reality. In the days following this internal crisis, viewers and royal analysts noticed a profound, subtle shift in how protocol is being weaponized. The Princess of Wales emerged as a portrait of freezing, aristocratic restraint without ever having to issue a single public statement defending her territory. Catherine did not need to negotiate for respect or leak tearful stories to the press, complaining about her mother-in-law's overreach. She simply allowed the massive quiet weight of her husband's absolute authority to protect her life's work. The visual shifts are becoming visible to anyone who knows how to read the subtle language of the palace. Shortly after the ring-fencing protocol was finalized, Kensington Palace released a routine digital update regarding one of Catherine's early childhood initiatives. To the untrained eye, it was standard royal correspondence, but to those watching the internal power dynamics, the visual cues were devastating. The digital letterhead bore only the sovereign cipher of William and Catherine, entirely stripped of any joint Buckingham Palace branding. Furthermore, the press release was distributed exclusively through a newly secured independent media syndicate managed directly by William's communications director, bypassing the Central Royal Press Office entirely. This was not a petty aesthetic choice. In the highest echelons of the British royal family, administrative autonomy is the forensic evidence of shifting power. By publishing that specific update authorized seamlessly through his own secure channels, William was actively executing the institutional restoration of his wife's legacy while signaling the permanent boundary placed upon Camilla. He demonstrated that uncomplaining sacrifice, fierce protection of the bloodline, and steadfast loyalty to the crown will always outmaneuver the unchecked ambition of outsiders. He does not need to fight Camilla for dominance because he has already engineered the ultimate checkmate. The true royals remain on the inside, protecting their staff and their patronages. And the outsiders are managed with flashing red lights and revoked access codes. This brings us to the deeper, tragic meaning of this entire crisis. Camilla spent 30 years carefully clawing her way to the very top of the British social hierarchy. She endured intense public hatred, she orchestrated a masterful public relations rehabilitation, and she successfully convinced Charles to place the highest crown in the land upon her head. She believed that reaching the summit meant she would finally be safe, that she could secure her organizational future and rewrite the history of the dynasty in her own image. But what this story of the Kensington Palace lockout undeniably proves is that the crown on Camilla's head is entirely hollow. She is surrounded by the trappings of unimaginable power, yet she is paralyzed by the operational reality that she is merely a temporary figure in William's empire. She played a 30-year game of chess, sacrificing everything for the ultimate title, only to realize too late that she cannot control the pieces on the board. Camilla is now trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, sitting next to a king who will no longer defend her bureaucratic schemes, walled off from the royal future and forced to live under the absolute unyielding authority of the next generation. The era of the Shadow Queen attempting to restructure the monarchy is effectively over. If you want to continue unpacking the silent warfare, the hidden administrative maneuvers, and the psychological power dynamics of the modern British monarchy, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We will continue to pull back the curtain on the illusions of power one subtle detail at a time. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next analysis.